My sugar daddy asks me for weird favours. His Tinder profile said he was 45, but he looked to be in his early 30s at most. Looking for a sugar baby, $700 weekly, no sex. It sounded too good to be true, but as a broke student at uni, I was willing to take my chances. I swiped right, and Tinder let me know it was a match. His message came seconds later. Hey there, sweetheart. I cringed at that word. I hated it, but $700 was $700, so I sucked it up and replied, hey. His name was Jack, and he told me he owned his own business. Although he never specified what kind of business it was, we talked for a while before he asked me for my Venmo to send me the first payment. After a few minutes, I got a notification. I stared at the $700 for at least 20 minutes, expecting to wake up from a dream any second, but it wasn't a dream. You still there? I clicked on the message. Yeah, sorry. If you don't mind me asking, what are you looking for in return? I stared at the chat until he replied, I'm just looking for you to do some favours for me. That sounded like it was going to be sexual to me. Like what? I asked. For example, the first thing I want you to do is pick up a delivery for me. That sounded innocent enough, but I was expecting there to be some kind of twist. $700 to pick up a package. Come on, even I wasn't that naive. From the post office or something? No, I'll send you the address, but I'd rather not do this through Tinder. Have you got Kik? Or you can give me your phone number. Kik, what is this, 2010? I decided to give him my number instead, and he texted me the address immediately, followed by the address to his house where I would need to drop the package off. I'm not home right now, but there's a key on the bottom of the blue flower pot near the door. Go inside and put the package on the coffee table in the living room. Make sure you lock the door when you go inside the house, and then lock it again when you leave. I grabbed my car keys and wallet and got into my car, putting the address into Google Maps. Got it, on my way. My phone buzzed as I backed out of the driveway. I'm serious. Lock the door both times, please. I thought this was a bit excessive, but I promised him that I would. The house looked abandoned. It had a broken chain-link fence around it with a small door that was hanging on to dear life. It stuck out like a sore thumb, surrounded by these houses that were a lot nicer than this one in comparison. You here for Jack's shit? I looked up to see a man standing in the open doorway of the house. He took up the entire space, his head skimming the top of the door frame, and he was huge. Yeah, I guess, I replied, not moving from my spot on the sidewalk. Stay right there, he said. I did. I don't actually think I would have moved if he asked me to. I looked around and realised that there was no one else on the street. I was a 21-year-old woman alone in the street. I gripped my car keys. A few minutes later, the man came back out carrying a cardboard box, and it was the size of the shoebox, but stained and damp on some of the corners. Can you open your car? He asked. I opened the trunk, not wanting that inside on my car seat, and he set it in. All right, there you go, he said. Thank you, I replied. I walked around to the driver's side and opened the door. Oh, one more thing, he said. I looked at him. Watch out, he said. I didn't reply. I blasted my music as I drove back to Jack's house, hoping that it would drown out the anxiety, but it didn't. I parked my car in the stone driveway and stayed in the car, admiring the house. It was a huge house with stone pillars on the front porch. I turned off the car, got out, grabbed the package, walked to the front door, got the key from where he said it would be. I opened the door, stepped inside, closed it behind me. I thought about what he said about locking the door when I got inside. I thought that it was a little bit overboard, but as I stared at the closed door, something made me reach out and lock it. I walked in and set the package down on the coffee table, and as I walked back to the door to leave, I heard a phone ringing from somewhere inside the house. I froze. In my pocket, my phone buzzed. I took it out to look. Don't answer any calls that aren't from Marvin. I put my phone back and followed the sound of the phone, poking my head into a few different rooms before I found it in an office. I walked over to the caller ID, incoming call from Jack. That was odd. I grabbed my phone to look at the message again. I was starting to get a little bit creeped out, and I decided I wouldn't answer, just be safe, and left the house, remembering to lock the door as I left. I did a few more favours for Jack since then. I drove a BMW to a random park in another city, only to get out and drive a different car back to Jack's house. He had me meet one of his employees at lunch, who then gave me a briefcase to deliver to the first house I'd ever gone to, and told me that he would know if I looked inside. On several occasions, he asked me to drive down to the same house and stay with the guy, whose name was Julio, for a certain amount of time. In total, I've made around $3,500. Most recently, though, Jack asked me to stay at his house overnight. I woke up to a text message from him. I need you to spend the night at my house. I hadn't ever seen him in person, but I had talked to him a few times on the phone. He proceeded to tell me that he would pay me $1,000 to spend the night at his house, provided that I followed a few rules. I drove to his house that evening. The driveway was empty, and it normally was, but the porch light was on. I walked up and unlocked the door, went inside, and then locked it again. Everything in the house looked the same. Jack had told me over the phone that he would leave a list of rules on the dining room table. My bags looked like garbage compared to the fancy furniture in there. I wandered into the kitchen and then to the dining room, and sure enough, there was a piece of paper on the wooden table held down by an empty glass. Lock the door when you come in. Only answer calls from Marvin. Don't turn on any faucets between 9 and 11 p.m. Don't open the door for anyone, no matter who they say they are, after 10 p.m. If the door to the closet at the end of the hall is open, sleep in the library. If closed, sleep in any of the bedrooms. The gardener comes at midnight. If he starts knocking on the windows, hide. Turn the TV on and let it play on static through the night. Do not forget to do this. Help yourself to anything in the fridge. I'll pay you in the morning. Good night. I made sure to follow all the rules, and to be honest, I was regretting my decision, but seeing as I was already here and I was already getting paid, I decided to stay anyway. I figured as long as I followed all the rules, I'd be okay. I'd be perfectly fine. Still, it felt a little odd, like what was this, a haunted house? Nevertheless, I lounged around the house for a few hours as I was planning on going to sleep around 9 p.m, since that's when all this weird shit would start to happen. At 8:50, I brushed my teeth, using the faucet for the last time before 9. I checked the closet in the hallway, and upon seeing that it was open, I moved my stuff into the library and got ready to sleep on the couch. I locked the doors just in case and laid on the sofa, scrolling through my phone. I hadn't got any more messages from Jack, and I was starting to think up scenarios and reasons as to why he had such a strict, peculiar set of rules in his house. I had dozed off at some point because, at exactly 10:16 p.m, I was awoken to the doorbell ringing. I was about to get up and checked, but then I remembered the rule. Don't open the door for anyone, no matter who they say they are, after 10 p.m. I stayed on the couch trying not to move, paranoid that they would even hear the slightest sound. It's the police, open up! I didn't move. Hello, it's the police, open up or we're coming in! I didn't move, but I could still hear my heartbeat in my ears. There was silence for a while after that. Then the doorbell rang again. Hey, it's Jack, let me in! It sounded like Jack, but still, I didn't get up. He would have a key, wouldn't he? And why would he need me to let him in? This continued for almost a full hour. Different people would ring the doorbell, announce themselves, and then disappear when I didn't respond. I was finally able to fall asleep, and the gardener never came. When I woke up in the morning, I heard someone in the kitchen. I got up slowly and unlocked the door as quietly as possible, taking my phone with me and walking across the living room into the kitchen. I stopped at the entrance and peered in. It was Jack. He was standing in front of the stove, stirring something as the coffee machine brewed coffee on the counter behind him. Hey, good morning. Hi. I hadn't seen him in person before, but he looked exactly like his pictures online. Scrambled eggs? He asked, motioning to the pan with a wooden spoon. Yeah, thanks, I said, walking over to take the plate from him. I ate my breakfast and drank some coffee in silence. So how was it? It was okay, nothing super freaky happened. Cool. I think I'm gonna go now, I have class. I didn't, but I wanted to just get out of there. Oh no, yeah, sure, I'll talk to you some other time, he said. I grabbed my stuff and he walked me to my car. I could see him standing in the driveway just staring at me as I left. When I got home, I unpacked all my stuff and noticed that I'd still had the list with me. I sat on my bed and reread it again. Turn the TV on and let it play static through the night. Don't forget this. I stared at the words on the page until they lost meaning. Beside me, my phone buzzed, snapping me back to reality. It was the $1,000 payment. I looked at my phone, then back at the list. Maybe it wasn't an important step? As I was thinking this, a text from Jack came. It said, I'm not in town right now. I should be back next week, so you're free from running any more errands from me until then. Just sent the payment. Go do something fun. I stared at the message and reread it again, and once more for good measure. I'm not in town right now. I thought back to this morning and how Jack was in his house, how he gave me breakfast. I'm not in town right now. Within minutes, a new text came, and this time it was from a number I didn't recognise. Did you forget to do something? The text was followed by a picture of Jack, or whoever this version of Jack was, standing in front of the TV. I didn't respond. Next came another picture. This one was from outside of my house. It was followed by another text. Watch out. I didn't leave my house for almost an entire week. The only reason I didn't stay indoors for longer is that anxiety I was feeling. As I drove to the campus, I kept my eyes glued to my surroundings, almost running 2 stop signs and a red light. I kept expecting Jack, or fake Jack, I suppose, to pop out randomly on the side of the road, or in the car next to me, or the car behind me. I constantly glanced in my rearview mirror, trying to figure out if the black truck behind me had been there the entire time, or if this was a different one than I'd seen 10 minutes ago. I hadn't told him where I went to school, so maybe he wouldn't know. Then again, I hadn't told him where I lived either, and he seemed to figure that one out quite quickly. I hadn't texted the real Jack since the incident had happened. I mean, I didn't even know what I was supposed to say. Oops, I didn't follow all of your rules, and now there's a weird lookalike of yours running around the city. My plan, as foolish as it was to act out like everything was all okay. I wasn't going to stir the pot by telling him I'd already fucked up, so instead I was going to wait until he realised that something was wrong, and hopefully he wouldn't. I admit that not telling him was more difficult than I thought, and I found myself constantly checking my phone for texts from Jack, but none appeared. I finished my exam that day, and sure that I would fail due to my lack of focus, I drove home where I'd found Julio standing in my driveway. He looked down at his phone, and I attempted to keep driving down the street before he saw me, but I wasn't fast enough. He glanced and began walking towards my car as I slowly pulled into the driveway, locking my doors and trying to remain calm. Instead of shifting into park, I kept my foot on the brake and shifted it into reverse, ready in case I needed to make a quick getaway. He leaned down and knocked on the window, making me jump. I turned to look at him and said nothing. "Roll your windows down," he said, motioning for me to lower the window. I pressed the button for a split second, only to make a tiny crack of space. "You know, it's not me you should be afraid of." I looked at him and glanced in my rearview mirrors, trying to see if any of my neighbours were outside, but they weren't, and I was alone with no witnesses. "You fucked it up. I told you to watch out, and you didn't. You managed to fuck up the rules on the first night. They always miss at least one." "They?" I looked at him and said nothing, because honestly I had no idea what to say. "Get out of the car, we're going inside." He tapped his hands on the roof of my car and walked towards the front door. I thought about driving away, but I wasn't sure where I'd go, and a part of me wanted to hear him out, so I found myself parking the car, turning the engine off, and letting Julio inside my house. He took a seat on my couch and glanced around my living room. "This is quite fancy for a college student. You buy this with Jack's money?" I rolled my eyes at him. "Why did you want to come in?" "Alright, touchy subject," he said, shrugging. "I need to talk to you about Jack." "Which Jack? The one I've been talking to, or the one that appeared at my house?" "What?" he snapped, leaning over and resting his elbows on his knees. "What? What do you mean, the one who appeared in the house? Jack isn't back yet. I came here to tell you that you forgot to lock the door after your little house-sitting gig, which Jack won't be pleased about. He's very particular about this stuff. He's gotten rid of girls for much pettier shit than this." I said nothing and stared at Julio while he stared back, waiting for me to explain myself. His use of the words "gotten rid of" made me nervous, and I wondered what he meant by that. Surely he wouldn't kill me over a mistake, right? "Was there someone else in the house?" he asked, after a few seconds of silence. Jack was in the house the morning I left." "Well, how do you suppose that happened? Because Jack hasn't come back from his trip yet." I shrugged, not really knowing what to say. Julio stood up and sighed in annoyance. "Fine, you know what? I originally came over here to ask you for a share of the cash you got for your poor house-sitting job, but it seems to me that you probably fucked up more than I originally thought, so I'm going to stay out of this, whatever this is. Good luck." He walked over and opened my front door, waving to me as he left, leaving me standing in an empty house. I paced around my house for a few hours before I finally decided that I was going back to Jack's house to make sure that no one had broken in, and if they had, I would make it as simply an anonymous police report or something. Besides, the only way that he would ever know that it was my fault would be that if Julio had snitched on me, which didn't seem like he was planning on doing. So I made my way over in silence, trying to control my breathing so that I didn't have a meltdown on the highway, pulled into the driveway, turned off the engine, and sat there because I couldn't work up the courage to get out of the car. I sat there for a few minutes just staring at this giant house, trying to force myself to unbuckle the seatbelt, open the door and get the hell out of the car. The house, which once looked impressive, now made me feel anxious and out of place. I couldn't stop myself from imagining all sorts of horrible scenarios that I could stumble upon once I opened the door. I thought about how many possible hiding places there were in that house. I don't know how long I sat there before I finally decided to get out of the car and walk towards the front of the house. At the front door, I took a deep breath and tried to push it open, only it didn't open because it was locked. I assumed that Julio had probably locked it and looked for the key on my keychain. I unlocked the door and stepped inside the living room, taking a look around. Everything looked normal enough. There were no signs of breaking and entering or anything like that, and I was glad that Julio had come over and realised my mistakes before somebody else had. I closed the door behind me, this time double checking that I locked it, and began to make my way further into the house. I went into the library first, which looked the same as it had before when I left. Next, I made my way through the living room, glancing around to see if anything was out of place, but nothing was. I started to feel better now that I'd confirmed that no one had broken in or ruined the place. That feeling was short-lived, however, when I walked into the kitchen. It was a complete mess. Both of the fridges and freezers were both wide open. All of the containers of food were emptied out. There were empty boxes of frozen food tossed onto the side, inside the freezer and on the kitchen floor. I walked out of the kitchen and made my way down the hall. I spotted the door at the end of the hall, and this time it was closed, so I continued to walk down the hall, but I couldn't help but notice how eerily quiet the house was. I poked my head into the study, but that was also empty. I headed down the hall again, but froze in my tracks when I noticed the door at the end of the hall was now open. Someone was in the house. I reached into my back pocket and grabbed my phone, checking to see if maybe I'd missed a call from Jack, but I had no signal in the house. I held my phone in my hand anyway, hoping I'd pick up enough signal to call for help. As I spun around, I found myself face to face with Jack, or whoever it was I was looking at. I knew he was the same man I'd seen this morning, but no idea who he really was. "You're the new one, right? The one from the other day? You're the one who forgot to turn the television on." "Yeah, I'm so sorry. I thought I was being careful. I didn't need to." I stopped talking as he started laughing. "Sorry? I should be thanking you." "Who are you?" I asked. I stared at his face, and he looked exactly like Jack, but I couldn't figure out why he was here when he said he was on his trip still. "I'm Jack," as if he was stating the obvious. "But Jack said he wouldn't be back for a few days." "Did he tell you when he would be back? The exact date?" I shook my head, confused. "But you can ask him, right?" I don't know. He hasn't contacted me in a few days." "Damn it, I was hoping it wouldn't be that bad." "Can you explain to me what the hell is going on?" I asked him. "You shouldn't have come back here." Something felt off to me, and chills shook my entire body. Part of me regretted not going along with my original plan of acting like everything was okay. I didn't want to stay in the house any longer, and there was nothing really I could do anyway, so I slowly stepped past him, glanced behind me, and continued to walk into the living room and towards the front door. I found myself walking faster and faster until I was basically running and throwing myself at the front door. I unlocked the door, but just as I was about to open it, I heard the lock slide back into place, only it sounded a lot louder than usual. I began to freak out as I pulled the door urgently, trying to get it to open, but something was keeping it shut. "What the fuck?" I glanced towards the hall as another noise was made, but I quickly realised that it was the sound of air flowing through the vents. I looked down at my phone, and not only did I now have signal, but I also had 3 messages from Jack. "I'm back. What happened? I know you're in the house." I looked around the room trying to find him or any security cameras in the room that would be alerting him of my presence. I didn't see any, and I grabbed my phone to text him back. "Are you here?" I held my phone in my hands as I made my way back towards the hallway to find the other Jack that I'd seen earlier. Even if he was another Jack, maybe this was the same person and he was just messing with me for some reason. I stood in front of the closed door for a second before making my way over to a window. I tried to open it, but the security system had locked the windows shut as well. I thought about breaking the window open, and I grabbed a sturdy-looking vase. I took a few steps back and then threw it at the window as hard as I could, but the vase shattered upon impact. So I walked back to where I left Jack, but he was gone, nowhere to be found. The door at the end of the hall was closed again, so I began to walk towards it, peeking into each room as I passed them, but there was no one else in the house. As I reached the door, my phone buzzed in my hand. "You were supposed to follow the rules." I text back, "I know, I'm sorry. I came back to make sure everything was okay." Another reply, "You should have stayed away. You're going to regret this." I didn't reply to the text. I just kept walking until I was at the bottom of the stairs in the basement. While I wasn't sure what I was expecting, it wasn't the normal-looking basement apartment that I'd stumbled into. I found Jack sitting on the sofa against one of the walls. He was reading a magazine and glanced up at me when he heard me step off the stairs. "What are you doing?" He shot to his feet and shouted at me. "The door was locked. I can't get out," I replied. "You are so fucking stupid," he exclaimed, walking over to me. "That's rude. How was I supposed to know the doors would be locked when the power came back on?" "You weren't supposed to come back," he shouted, his face turning an angry shade of red as he yelled. "I wanted to make sure everything was okay." Who cares? You got $1,000 for house sitting. Why didn't you just take it and leave? Why are you so angry? Why are you even here? You're clearly not Jack. I snapped, annoyed. How do you know? He asked in a calmer tone. What? How do you know I'm not Jack? I look like the pictures you've seen, don't I? Yeah, but Jack's on vacation. How do you know? He repeated. What are you talking about? Have you ever met Jack in person? Have you ever talked to him on the phone, video call, anything other than a text message every few days? I didn't reply to him. I just stared at him. He was right. He did look exactly like the photos I'd seen on Tinder. That's what I thought, he replied to my silence. What are you saying exactly? I asked as I heard my phone buzz again. How do you know that the person you've been talking to is a real person? As a matter of fact, how do you know that it's not me? Maybe this was my plan all along, just to lure you here. At that point, it finally hit me that he was right. I didn't know if I was talking to a real person. All I'd been doing were random favours for someone on the internet who wanted to pay me money to do these things for some reason. I guess I had always felt that there was something off about a sugar daddy who was willing to pay someone to do things other than have sex with them, but I needed the money too badly, too much to even spend any time questioning it. I was feeling even more scared now. My palms were cold and sweaty as I stood there, waiting for him to do something. I could run back upstairs, but I didn't think I'd be fast enough to get out of there, or find something to jam the door and keep him downstairs. I took a shaky deep breath as I tried my hardest to make it seem like I wasn't scared. If Jack was dangerous, I didn't want to alert him to any of my plans of trying to run. After a few seconds of silence, I glanced down at my phone to read the most recent texts, but there were no new notifications. That wasn't your phone, Jack said. I looked up at him and glanced at the phone sitting on the table nearby. Suddenly he jumped towards me and I attempted to jump out of the way, but I was too slow. I saw Jack grab my arms and my phone fell out of my hands and everything went black. When I came to, I was sitting on the living room sofa and Jack was standing above me looking down. What happened? I asked. I attempted to sit up, but I noticed that I was incredibly dizzy and my left arm felt really sore when I tried to prop myself up. I remembered Jack grabbing me earlier and I figured he'd just gripped my arm too tight. Oh, you're finally up. Good. I slowly managed to sit up, wincing as I put weight on my left arm. I looked at Jack, who was now standing a few feet away with a bandage wrapped around his right bicep. What happened? I asked. You really shouldn't have come back. What happened? I said again, looking down at my arm. I slowly reached over and started to unwrap the bandage until it came off, and I was left staring at crudely done stitches on the inside of my bicep. What the fuck is this? I snapped, looking at Jack. Sorry, but you really shouldn't have come back. Although I'm kind of glad you did. I really didn't want to do this, but I need to get out of here. He began to back away from me, heading towards the front door. I watched as he easily opened it and wondered how he disabled the lock and if he had been the one to activate it in the first place. Good luck. I helped you out a bit while you were out, he said, motioning towards my phone on the sofa next to me. I stood up and went after him. Surprisingly, he didn't try to run or back up and just simply stood about a foot away from the door watching me. As I attempted to step outside, a stabbing pain erupted in my left arm, travelling throughout the rest of my body until I felt like I was being stabbed everywhere at once. I fell to the floor, crying out in pain. Once I was back in the house, the pain went away and I laid on the floor, shaking in the aftermath as I stared up at Jack. What did you do to me? I had to get out. It's been 8 months. I'm sorry, but you were just the first one to come back this time. I'm sure you're a good person, but I'm sorry, I can't be here. You're just going to leave me here? I shouted. Julio will come by to give you food, and by the way, don't try to cut that thing out of your arm. This place is covered in cameras, and if you do anything suspicious, Julio will see you, and he won't hesitate to stop you. I learnt that the hard way. I didn't know what to say, and I just stood there in shock as I watched Jack walk over to my car and get in it, start the engine, and disappear down the street. I finally shut the door and locked it, turning back to face the empty house. I glanced at my phone, which was still on the sofa, and I remembered what Jack had said before he left. I walked over, trying not to move my arm too much as I picked it up and turned it on. My Tinder profile was open, only it had been changed now, and my profile bio read, "Looking for a sugar baby, $700 a week, no sex." On the table next to it, there was a list of house-sitting rules, similar to the ones that I had found on the day that I'd been here. At the bottom of the page, there was a lime green sticky note that read, "Sorry, I hope you're able to get out soon. Don't worry, maybe you won't be here for long. They almost always forget one of the rules. Good luck, Jack."